Good morning, everyone. We're going to get started in about a minute here. Just going to let some people come join our LinkedIn Live today. I'm going to do a very special episode today. We usually do our episodes on Wednesday or Thursday, but I'm doing a special one today, and then we will also be doing one on Thursday, which I believe will be around trade shows and talking how to prospect before a trade show, during a trade show, after a trade show. So that'll be our LinkedIn Live on Thursday. But this morning, I want to kind of have a special conversation with you guys today. So I just got back from SAS North. That was in Ottawa last week. And it was funny, within the first 15 minutes of me even setting up my booth, I had a lady come over to me and, tell me how she listens to my LinkedIn Lives and how it's very motivating. So I want to kind of come on today, and she asked me, I wish you could give a little bit more about your story, like where you come from, Shawn, because a lot of you guys see me post a lot of content on here. So today, I actually want to talk about, where I come from, how I got to where I am today, where I started out, my tennis career, and everything. So I hope you guys really enjoy it, so you guys get to know me more on a personal level than just on a business level or a client prospect employee level. So this is even for some of my employees who don't know the exact history of me. I hope this will resonate with you, but also for people that have kids and stuff. And you hear my story, I hope it can also motivate you, motivate your kids to kind of get up and do different things with playing sports. So first thing, SAS North was a great event for anyone I met there. Denis was there, a great friend of mine on LinkedIn. The company Paddle was there. A lot of great companies were there. A lot of great connections were made, networking. I think that's the best thing about conferences now is kind of the networking. And obviously getting to show the Autoklose product. But it was more those relationships I built, potential partnerships with Microsoft, which we're talking about next week. But all that stuff was great. So anyone that was at SAS North that is here, great to see you, and hope you guys are well and enjoying some of the snow we're having here in Toronto. So, as I said, today we're going to talk about more my story. So I want to give you guys a little bit of background information about me, just to start off before I go into how I started my different companies, how I had a tennis career before I even became an entrepreneur, where I play tennis, and etc. So, in my family there are four boys. There's four boys, all within 5 years. Three of us actually went out to do our MBAs. One of my brothers actually lives in Florida. He works in the broadcasting space. Other brother works for one of the largest telecom companies here in Toronto. And my other brother is in real estate. So we kind of have a broad spectrum inside our family. We were all actually tennis players. So when we were younger, at age of 7, my parents put us all into tennis. And it was, one of those things where, we were good, but it was also it was a great for they knew it would be good for networking, and also they used to say I'd rather you go to a tennis and play tennis on a weekend than go to a mall and just hang out. So that was how we got into tennis, and I grew up playing competitive tennis for 15 years. One of the top ranked North American tennis player, as well as in the top 250 in the world at one point. But it was more of what tennis actually taught me when I was 16, 17, 18. Not only was I traveling with my tennis coach, but it was also, you have to grow up very quickly. When I was actually playing, I am the same age as, the Roger Federers, Andy Roddick's, obviously never that good. We played in the same tennis tournaments, but I was actually never, obviously, at least close to as good as those. And Roger Federer is one of my favorite players now, where Andre Agassi, growing up, was my favorite player. But what happened was at age 18, even though I was one of Canada's, number 2 in Canada, I was given, the ultimatum by my parents. And the ultimatum was, A, you can try and become a tennis pro, or B, you can kind of go the education route. And back then, not like it is today, but back then, there wasn't many tennis players in Canada that made, I guess, a career out of tennis. So it was one of those things. I was kind of injury prone, and you get injured once, you might, if you don't have the education as your backbone, you probably end up, coaching tennis. There's nothing wrong with that, but you'd probably end up coaching tennis and not be able to live your dream of doing much else because A, you won't have the work experience because all you've been doing your whole life is actually coaching tennis. And that was one thing that really resonated with me. Even though I do look back now and I see a lot of my colleagues playing for Davis Cup in Canada, that was a tough decision that I had to make, even though I didn't have much of a choice, but I had to go the education route. But I want to first also talk about, what tennis taught me. At a very young age, I had to learn how to network. I'd have to learn, as a 16, 17, 18, 19-year-old, teaching tennis to people in their 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, and 70s, some of, even the wealthiest people here in Toronto, you had to learn that you can't act like a 17, 18-year-old in front of them. You have to really learn, okay, how do you have to talk? How can you relate to people that are typically almost 2 to 3 times my age? So I would say one thing that sports in general, can be tennis, can be anything, is the networking aspect. Not only that, when we get further into this, every job I've taken throughout my career before I became an entrepreneur was actually through somebody I met or I coached on a tennis court. And it was one thing, my networking would be like I'd speak to, people at our day camp, our tennis day camp here in Toronto. I'd be like, so what does your father do? What does your mother do? And then anything that would resonate, one was a CEO of a huge financial firm. And I was going to do my finance MBA. So all of that stuff in networking is very important when, you play a sports in general. The second thing was, coaching, being able to help people. So going on a tennis court and being able to say, okay, guys, on your forehand, make sure you put your racket back and stuff like that. So coaching was another one. Sales, I belonged to it was a tennis club where I belonged and I was coaching, and we would have 5 to 6 coaches there. So when somebody comes in and wants a private lesson, what do? Well, you have to compete with the 5 to 6 coaches to try and get that as your client, which at age 17, you would think, okay, well, like how are you going to, you fight, you just, it came down to, who was the first one to approach them, who had the personality, who could build that relationship. And all of that is the same thing I do now. Most of my clients that stay with us for years are all through relationships. But, when you think about it, sports makes you build those relationships because, I had to fight to get tennis lessons. If I didn't get a tennis lesson, I didn't get paid. So that was one thing I said that really resonated and really helped with sales was was working with other sales coaches and trying to get that client that you can teach tennis to. So at age 17, 18, well, actually it was more 19 to 24, when I was teaching tennis, those were the skills I was learning. And you look back now and you're like, oh, well, I didn't think those were the skills I was learning, but you were using those skills and you were practicing those skills at a very young age. So I then made my decision. And by the way, guys, if you guys are listening to this and you know me from my tennis days, just let me know in the chat. If you know me from my MBA days, let me know. If you know me from Autoklose or Exchange Leads, let me know. I'd love to hear from you guys, and I will reply to every single one of you right after the LinkedIn Live. Also, if there's any questions you guys have about bringing kids up in tennis or tennis in general, or questions about how to find the right coach, it doesn't have to be Autoklose related. Ask me anything after this. I want to keep this as open as possible for you guys to get to know me a little better, but also ask me any questions that can help you, your family, etc. So what was next? I chose the education route. I ended up doing my MBA at the DeGroote School of Business in Hamilton, which was actually a co-op program. And so you might be saying, why did you choose the co-op program over a regular MBA? And the reason why, my whole life was tennis. I had no work experience. I worked in retail for a little bit, but I'd be traveling all over the world every week. I'd be, in high school, I'd be going away for 3 weeks, having tests faxed to me in Barbados while I was at a tennis tournament, given an hour to do the test and send it back. So I had to get the MBA, but I wanted the education, but I also needed the work experience, which is why the co-op MBA program was just an amazing program for me. So what did I do? I worked in finance. I worked for the largest banks here in Canada. I got my MBA in finance, but also got my work experience in the finance fields. Now, one thing I will say for anyone that might have kids that are going into university or going to do their MBA, finance is, I find, the best backbone to have for any entrepreneur, any businessman. Not only is it good because you can have a successful career in finance, but you need to know numbers. And what the finance MBA did was help me understand, profit, loss, margin, gross margin, turn all the different numbers that I analyze on a daily basis for my own companies was all through my finance degree. So, when people say, well, you got a finance degree and you became an entrepreneur and you went into sales, well, that's fine. Finance is great. And if you are in sales or marketing, you don't know much about finance, or you're an entrepreneur that don't know much about finance, you got to learn more about finance, because finance is going to be what will help your company either know if you're profitable or not profitable. People always ask me also, what was the best thing about the MBA? And I will tell you it was networking. Still to this day, I go, once a month. There's about a handful of people that were in my MBA program. Some started, $1 million businesses. Some are still working in finance. But I meet up with them, and there's about a handful I meet up with, once a month to go for coffee. We just talk strategy, ideas. But it's built like your company's a family. I feel like the MBA was like a family. The skills I learned were amazing. But I would say the networking and the people I've met were kind of what's helped me and driven me to be where I am today. So, I would say, the MBA, real life work experiences, combining that with, my tennis really helped me and really shaped my career. Not to get into if I miss my tennis days, because I do. I haven't touched a racket in about a year and a half now, and I really want to. But it's great to have that competitive spirit. And even now, I tell people, what is the number one thing I look for in a salesperson? It's competitiveness. So I will actually look on a resume to see if he or she has played a sport. And the reason why is because if they're competitive, I think they'll be successful in sales. Not necessarily, they won't always be, but that's what I look at. So did my MBA, and what I did was I only had a few work experiences in some of the largest banks. So what I did was I graduated and I worked for a large manufacturing company out of Vaughan, which is here in Toronto, well, close to Toronto, where we were manufacturing and distributing the largest private label shampoo, conditioner, body wash, all that stuff all over North America. So every Walmart, Costco, etc. But I actually met a gentleman, so it was actually the CEO's father, who was an elderly gentleman, but kind of came to Toronto and just did amazing things here. Started multiple businesses, hundreds of millions of dollars probably in businesses. But what he taught me back then is what's turned me into the person I am today. And I actually reached out to him yesterday over email. His name is Louis. And what Louis did for me was he really, back then I didn't know what he was teaching me negotiations with suppliers, how to deal with suppliers. For example, if you contact people in Asia, for example, because we had some stuff manufactured and brought to us from Asia, bottles, caps, etc., how to deal with contracts. But back then I didn't think about how much I actually learned in that 3 years working with Louis. And it's tremendous, because I will say when I write emails now, even how I write my emails, or if I say best regards or kindest regards, everything I learned was actually through Louis. And I always tell him when I see him, he was the reason why I became an entrepreneur in the first place, was the motivation and how I saw and what I saw from him. And he still works today. So I think, sometimes you look back 10 years and be like, well, that was actually where I learned a lot of the stuff. And back then it didn't, to me it was just okay, I'm learning. But now as an entrepreneur, owning some companies, it's definitely something that I personally cherish. But I also look back and say, wow, I learned a lot from Louis in just those 3 years. And I probably learned 25 years of business just working side by side with him in 3 years. So thanks, Louis. I know you're probably not listening, but I will definitely reach out to you, and we'll be going for coffee soon. So my first business, after I was working for the packaging company, I started my own kind of packaging company. I had some connections in the Orient. And what I did was I started bringing cosmetic packaging here to Toronto. At first, I was in my early 20s, mid 20s. And ideally what I wanted to do was I was just hoping to make enough money for rent. I was like, okay, I'm learning how to run a business, and I have packaging being done in the Orient, bringing it to Toronto, distributing it to my handful of clients here. And now come 10 years later, those companies that would be ordering, 100 boxes or $1,000 worth of product that would help pay my rent have become A, some of my best friends, but B, are now in over 1,000 stores in the US. So I still run that business today. So, people always ask, well, how many business do you run? I still have a handful of clients, the same handful of clients through relationships, haven't left me, and it's been over 10 years since, I think it's almost 12 years now I've been working with them, the same handful, and I still work for them. But and it's great to see how they've grown as companies. But it's one of my businesses. It was the first business that kind of got me into as an entrepreneur. And still to this day, I still have a business that manufactures cosmetic packaging from the U.S. And that was all built from my connections I built at my first company. So then what happened? Went to my MBA and stopped. I was in finance. And to be the honest truth, what happened was I was on an elevator, and I said good morning to my boss. And my boss, looked at me like, why are you saying good morning to me? And I was always a very social person. So he was just looking at the screen at the top of the elevator. And I said to myself, wow, I love finance, but I'm just very personal. This is not for me. So I actually went in for an interview with a finance recruiting firm here in Toronto to get a job in finance. And he goes, you know what, with your personality, I think I have a position open as a VP of sales. Even though we're a finance recruiting, I have a guy who's looking for finance, but he's looking for a VP of sales. And I think you'd be perfect. I'm like, VP of sales? I have a finance degree. So what I actually did was I went in for the interview as a VP of sales and got the job. I got the job. I was paid amazing money. And I was like, wow, I'm now a VP of sales for a computer software company. And I was just like, okay, I'm out of finance. I got an opportunity. I never thought I'd be able to get out of finance because my whole life was tennis or my whole life was finance MBA. Didn't have much other experience, but I got the opportunity. And within, I'll tell you that, quickly, within the first week of my VP of sales job, I saw that there was some company, I'm not going to name the company, there was a company that was acquired for hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars in data. And you guys probably know who I'm talking about. And I was like, wow, I can do that and do it better. And that's what started me to build my first company, Exchange Leads, which was a data company. It was a crowdsourced data company. And what was amazing was I said to myself, well, how am I going to be a VP of sales and start a company? Because I came up with this on the first week at my job. So what I did was I'd work 9 to 5, and then from 6 to 10, I would start my company. And for a year, I had my software being developed. Between 6 and 10, I'd work with my developers, and I'd ideally work from 9 a.m. to 10 p.m. So 9 to 5 was my day job to pay my rent, and then 6 to 10, I'd be starting my business. A year later, I actually quit my VP of sales job that was giving me a 6-figure salary, and I quit for $49. So my first sale at Exchange Leads was actually $49. And I took the leap, and I told myself I'd save 6 months worth of rent, helps me survive for 6 months. I have 6 months to get this from $49 and grow it. And that's kind of what I did, how I got Exchange Leads started. Within 6 months, I got 3 of the top 10 largest companies in Canada by just using my network from tennis. Got in there, started selling my data company data to all these different companies, and then parlayed that business into Autoklose, which we run today, which has, as I said, about 35 employees all over the world. We have over 3,500 clients now, and so it was kind of like almost a 360 of what I did. Going from potentially trying to be the next Andre Agassi to doing my MBA to working in manufacturing to going back into finance, and then getting an opportunity in VP of sales within a week, finding a flaw in the sales process by not finding quality data, started your company, and a year later, took the leap. So that's kind of where I come from. But I'd love for you guys to let me know if you have any questions about anything else, or where you know me from. Let me know if it's tennis, because I love always hearing from all my old tennis colleagues. If it was from my MBA, just put in the chat where we know each other from. I hope you guys are really enjoying my story. What other stuff? So my wife is actually in sales also. She's actually now a team lead for a medical technology company out of the U.S. And she actually last week just won the Winner's Circle and President's Club. So I am going to, I think she's thinking of Hawaii and New York, which is great. So she's also in sales. So as you can imagine, there's two of us that are, I have a sales platform and she's in sales. So it's a very competitive household. But, besides that, the lessons I'd really like you guys to learn from here is learn my story. So when we see each other at conferences, you know more about me, but also, feel free to let me know, because if you guys have kids that might be growing up, that might be looking to become an entrepreneur, I'd love to answer any questions, or kids that are playing tennis and you'd like to know anything about tennis, please let me know. I'm very passionate about tennis, so let me know any questions you have. But I would say, here are some things that I hope you guys can really get from this today. Is one, sometimes the path that you're on, my path was tennis. You don't end up going that path. You go another path, but it works out for the better. And, I would say, as much as I enjoyed beating people on the court, now I've translated that into beating my competition in every business software company I own. So I'm just as passionate as my business now at Autoklose that I was with my tennis career. Doing an MBA and networking is one tool that you can't stop. You got to start at a young age, have your kids start at a young age, put your kids into sports. It'll help them build character. A lot of my friends that are very successful all played a sport when they were younger, and that's the reason why even my customer success manager right now at Autoklose played competitive basketball. So everyone kind of like she played basketball in Europe, and it just sports is a very big thing for me. So that's one thing I would say, but also always improve yourself, and always realize that things you might do 3, 5, 7 years ago, 7 years later, you might realize, wow, that's what really turned the corner for me. That's what really helped me. Because as I said, when I write emails now, I just think like, wow, I'm writing an email like Louis did 10 years ago. And it's the truth. So I hope this was, you guys enjoyed this. I just wanted to kind of do it. Came up with it on the weekend. I want to kind of tell you, when people kept asking me, like, tell me about your background, Shawn. So now you guys know my background. Let me know in the chat anything else you want to know about me. I'm an open book. As I said, anything about sports, about sales, about entrepreneurship, about school, absolutely anything. I'm more than willing to help. I will be back on Thursday where we'll be going over the trade show secrets, and we'll talk about what we did at SAS North and how that was successful, and what I would do before, after, and during a trade show. So I hope you guys really enjoyed this. I will go into the chat right now and answer all your questions, but everyone have a great day. Enjoy the holidays. And hopefully wherever you are in the world, you're enjoying the weather, because right now we have a lot of snow here in Toronto. Thank you, guys.